right. Wise, intelligent. I want to say welcome. I never knew TV, right?
Thanks for having me.
A serious thing. One of the topics I wanted to touch on is that transition in the 90s from conscious rap into what we have now. But before we do, I wanted you to talk on the Kerner Commission, right? And its connection to the change in conscious rap. Because it seems at the time of the Kerner Commission, there seemed to be a high level of racial pride, self esteem, and understanding of the political system amongst a large portion of black people at that time, right? When it was implemented, it seemed to be the rise of black exploitation movies.
Yeah, all of that correlates. Right after the Kerner Commission report on civil disorder, we had uh, an influx of content and media that was very exploitative. You know, um, the exploitation movies of the late '60s, '70s. You know, to neutralize, you know, the revolutionary spirit in the community, um, the the spirit that was required to basically change or at least alter the status quo in some way, form, or fashion. Um, and it was all a part of what they had been doing prior to that with the implementation of COINTELPRO, and GIP, the Ghetto Infiltration Program, the actual government program, the Infiltration Program,
Explain that one. I
GIP,
never heard that one
GIT.
before.
Yes. Yeah, that's something to Google, something to do some research on, but it's an actual program and it was run out of the same bureau, the FBI, and their aim was to infiltrate all movements, all urban movements, that aimed for justice, equity, and transformation of the status quo.
What do you feel is like the main part that caused that transition where they noticed to say we won't be funding any conscious rap anymore?
Well, there was a myriad of things. It's not just one thing, I believe, but it was sort of a cacophony of attitudes that were impacting that response, that kind of contributed to that response. And and number one, again, you had youth being motivated to a more positive attitude and lifestyle, as well as taking a decided stance against oppression, against injustice, aligning themselves with movements for justice, at that time. Apartheid, we were big on ending apartheid. We were actually in the streets. We were actually spearheading boycotts of corporations that were contributing to the oppression
Were they
of
doing
South
Reebok
Africans.
at the time? I remember
Yes,
Reebok was a big one.
Reebok, Coca-Cola, quite a few. And we were seeing progress. They saw the impact, they saw the influence that hip hop culture had at the time. They understood that it wasn't just a fad or a trend, but it was actually uh, a serious instrument for social change. And they said, okay, we have to control this because if it's going to change anything, it's going to change it the way that we want the changes. We're going to use it for our ends, for our agenda, and that's what happened. So now one of the greatest instruments for social change in the history of this country, which is hip hop, is now an arrow in the sheath of the the oppressor and the establishment that hip hop music was created to challenge.
I want to jump back to your younger days, right? What was the origin or when did your consciousness start to rise?
That would go back to the Nation of God's Nurse 5%. You know, it was so many 5%ers starting to pop up in my neighborhood. My brother,
You're from New Brunswick, right?
I was born in New Brunswick,
Yeah.
but moved to Trenton, New Jersey at 2 years old. So
And the 5%ers were in Jersey like that?
yeah, they
That's
were
wild.
heavy. They were heavy. They were heavy in, around 82, around 81, 82. The 5% was like very, very popular in our neighborhoods. And as well as New Brunswick. My cousins. When I moved from, when my parents moved from New Brunswick to Trenton, New Jersey, all of our uncles, aunts were still in New Brunswick. Our cousins, first cousins, and were still in New Brunswick. And they became 5%ers as well. So yeah, but it was around that time. I was around 12, 13 years old. My brother was 5%er. He came in the house one day, you know, proclaiming that he's God. So you can just imagine, I'm like, okay, you know, I'm 13 years old. I have all the youthful sarcasm, so I had jokes. You know, uh, I didn't take to the 5%, initially,
Why was that?
because, I'm not easily sold. You know what I mean? I was never a follower. I was never a follower. So I had to do my own research. It's one of those things where I had to learn more about it. But for initially, it was just jokes to me. It was jokes to me because, the ideas would seem sound, freedom, justice, equality, knowledge, wisdom, understanding, you know, the principles, the values, but the behavior of the individuals that were espousing on these things didn't align with,
Manifest.
you know,
Inconsistency between the
yeah,
teachings and actions.
we were street kids. We were kids, corner kids. We were corner kids. We had a lot of street time, single parent households. Parents separated. So mom's was doing her thing by herself. Trying to keep meals on the table. So we had a lot of free time. We in the streets, peer to peer information. Peer to peer rites of passage. So the 5%, it it caused me to study. It made me start to consider things that I didn't consider before, things I had no idea about. Like, you're in the hood and you used to, niggas ain't shit, frankly. So when you hear somebody saying that the black man is God and kings and queens and, you know, that gets your attention. That should get your attention, and it did. So my physical, he got incarcerated. He's in the youth house. His lessons home. So curiosity. I go through his lessons and I'm reading it. It's intriguing. You know, um, Sent me down the rabbit hole. Sent me down the rabbit hole at 13 years old. Made me interested in reading and studying. Just going down the rabbit hole of history, the history. You know, um, Figuring it out, trying to cross-reference a lot of what they was doing. At a young age, I felt like, because one of the things that the lesson said was, the original man does everything all wise, right, and exact. So in order to be all wise, right, and exact, you have to fact check what you're doing. We were fact checking before we even knew fact checking was a thing. We were just cross-referencing and making sure that these things had historical precedence. You know, and at 13, I just started studying so much. And then my physical brother, P. Israel, Power Israel was his name. He uh he writes the name Wise Intelligent in his notebook, tear the page out and give it to me. He said, "That's your name from now
That's how you
on."
got the name.
Yeah, he's like, "That's your name from now on. That's what we calling you from now on." So I was like, whatever. I was like, whatever. I didn't take to it, I didn't say, okay, this is what it is. It's just what he said. And then he had all the other guys that he was running with calling me that. So they had to call me. So, like they say, it ain't what they call you is what you respond to. You know what I mean? So I responded to the name.
What role did 5% play in the messages coming out of hip hop from that mid 80s to early 90s?
Very profound. The 5% had a very profound impact on hip hop culture and its growth and development. You know, Going back, I remember listening to the Supreme Team. The Supreme Team, World Aim Supreme Team, show. Those are 5%ers. You know, they did the first nation, the national anthem, the 5% anthem on the radio. It was their routine. I got the cassette from them and redid it on our second album after them, you know. So, and the terminology, you know, the glossary, the hip hop glossary, you know, we use cipher. We call it a cipher when we in the cipher rhyming, but for us, the cipher came from building,
Building it.
you know, you know, a lot, word is life, word is bond, you know, talking to a sister, let me get your math, or just in general, you need the phone number, let me get the math, you know, that's all 5% lingo, you know, and so much more, you know, and so much more, you know, the 5% was very heavy. You know, even when you listen to that, go back and listen to that record. Hey DJ, when you play that song, Supreme Team. When you go to Supreme Team, you listen to that, you'll hear the callers. They had the the segment where the callers would call up requesting. And Rakim calls up. Rakim Bashar Allah calls up. And nobody knew at the time this was going to be the guy who become the God MC, right? Rakim is on that record, you know, as one of the callers, you know. So it's just a lot of influence, you know, from the 5%. You know, you go back, you know, you look at all the different crews. All the crews, a lot of the crews had 5%ers. Not all of them, but a lot of them had 5%ers present. You know, Stetsasonic, he had Wise in Stetsasonic, 5%er. You know, you had Just Ice with Boogie Down Productions, and their crew, Just Ice, 5%er. You know, so a lot of influence, a lot of influence.
Could you explain the importance of the mathematics in the 5%ers?
It's spree mathematics is a life process. And it applies to everything in life because it's math. You know, math applies to everything. So spree mathematics is knowledge. It's knowledge at a cipher. So it's 1 to 10, right? It's 1 to 10. Knowledge at a cipher. So you have principles like knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, freedom, power, refinement, equality, God, build, destroy, born, knowledge at a cipher. That's 1 to 10. But each one of those principles are very profound because they all mean something in your growth and development as a human being, you know, and not just for human beings and individuals, but for groups, nations, tribes, you know, families. That same process applies everywhere, you know, from knowledge to knowledge cipher. So you add those, you take those principles, you need those principles in everything you do, whether it's business, whether it's family, whether it's nation building, culture, you know, is principles that lay the groundwork. It's the foundation for everything that we do. It's mathematics.
When did the teaching start to decline in a sense? It seemed like they started to fade away at a certain point.
No, the teachers didn't decline. You know, the teachers didn't decline just like hip hop didn't change. You know, that's one of the misconceptions that we have based on mainstream perceptions, right? So we have this idea of hip hop that was created by the mainstream. So we'll say, okay, hip hop changed from one thing to the next, changed from conscious to a dumbed down version of hip hop or rap music, whatever. But in reality, hip hop remained exactly the same way that it's always been. We're just judging it by the 10 artists that we hear in heavy rotation on mainstream mediums.
Disregarding everybody else
And
that's still
disregarding
holding
all
it.
the conscious MCs that exist everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world. I'm locked in with MCs from all over the world who have followings, have traction on the ground where it's supposed to be, where
They're
hip
just
hop
not
is.
fueled by the machine.
Yeah, it's not fueled by the machine. So when we say that hip hop is dead, when we say that hip hop has changed and is no longer the same, that's a perception created by mainstream.
But elaborate more on the 5%ers now, how it hasn't declined.
I mean, 5%. It's 5% of the population who understand the truth and teach it. That's it. You know, if we're looking at a population of 100%, you know, 5% are the 5% that understand the truth and teach it intentionally, right? Then you have the 10% who know the truth but don't teach it, but use it to leverage the 85%, right? To exploit the 85%. So that's your 85%. The 85% of the masses who don't know the truth, easily led in the wrong direction, but very hard to be led into the right direction. So the 10% understand this. So the 10% conceal the truth. and become pastors of the sheep, or shepherds of the sheep that mislead the sheep, basically lead them to the slaughter, lead them to the butcher, you know, in various ways. But that's what Fox says.
Many times when people speak about colonialism, they speak about it in past tense as if it doesn't exist anymore. But what I notice is obviously colonialism is very evident, but it's very evident in the intellectual resources of the black community. Can you speak about that, please?
Yes, colonialism, it's very evident in the black community, whether we're talking about the continent of Africa and the diaspora. Wherever the diaspora is, we're dealing with the same colonialism that the continent is dealing with, and it's having a similar result, you know, on the continent and across the diaspora. For example, I work heavy in the not-for-profit space. Rap Snacks Foundation, Boss Up Foundation. It's a not-for-profit, and we're in the community all the time. And in this space, we're considered an under-resourced community. Black communities are considered under-resourced communities, but I disagree. Right? We're heavily resourced communities. We have various resources across various levels of society. For example, hip hop. Hip hop is a cultural resource that generates about $20 billion annually, and less than 1% of the receipts from that business come back to the communities that created it. Right. So that resource is being extracted from the community. So we're not under resourced, we're over extracted, right? That's that's really what's happening. Just like with Africa, they consider Africa under resourced, impoverished, when it's not. It's the most resourceful continent on earth in terms of manpower, wealth, and resources, right? So they've set up these extraction points to extract the resources. So Africa's not under resourced, it's over extracted. The black community throughout the diaspora is not under resourced, it's over extracted. That's the example with hip hop, but not just there. We have creative genius, we have intellectual genius, we have academic genius. The academic genius gets siphoned out of the community because we don't have the institutions developed in the community to sustain the lives of the academics and that innovative genius. So it gets siphoned out of the community by Fortune 500 corporations and all these other groups. So they're extracting the academic resource out of the community as well.
Sorry to
You know,
cut you, right? But you brought up a great point because when they usually speak about brain drain, they talk about someone in another country who comes to America, but we don't acknowledge the brain drain within our own communities, as you spoke about.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, we see this happening again in various areas of the community where we have these resources. Think about it. We talk about athletes, and we're always, we're big fans of sports. We watch sports, things of that nature, but that's another resource that gets extracted out of the community when we consider 80% of all NFL players are black. 80% of all NBA players are black. Collectively, they're about a 32 plus billion dollars a year industry, with less than 1% of those business receipts coming back to the communities where these athletes come from. Right. So there's another resource that's being extracted, and it happens with everything we do. You know, the resources get extracted. We could talk about monetary resources. And how much of what we spend is with other groups. You know, um, that's a resource. A monetary resource is extracted at the point of purchase. You go into a corner store in our neighborhoods, you have 250 products in the corner store, with exceptions to maybe one or two. Nothing else is black owned. We no longer own the retail in the community. Now it's owned by foreigners. The corner stores, all owned by foreigners. The distribution networks that take the products to the stores, the manufacturers that manufacture the product, none of that. So we're not producing, we're not manufacturing, we're not producing, we're not distributing, we're not retailing any of what we consume, right? So these extraction points, these are like trading posts. They set up the trading posts in the continent of Africa, and they just, and started transatlantic slave trade or what have you. And it's the same thing. These same extraction points exist in our community, and the resources are being extracted out of the community. And this is colonialism. This is another form of colonialism, you know. And the reason that it becomes difficult for us to overcome this colonization of our resources in the United States is because we have a falsification of consciousness. So the colonization of our minds is what's preventing that, you know, because we perceive ourselves to be American citizens, right? So by perceiving yourself to be an American citizen, you don't see the need or the point of establishing your own life-sustaining institutions, right? Institutions that are us centered, right? So, like every other group has, right? Every other group has. You think of every other group here, each group controls some form of industry in this country, you know? We know who controls the banking industry in the United States. We know who controls sanitation industry in the United States. We know who controls the construction industry in the United States. We know who controls law enforcement in the United States. You know, we know the Italian, the Jewish, the Irish, the East Indian. We know the parts of the industry, the industries they control in this economy, right? You know, our community, because we suffer from a colonized mind, you know, a
And
falsification of consciousness, we don't see the point in doing it.
what are some tactics can you tell people to better work together with their brother and have a realistic approach to working with your brother or your sister?
You know, again, it starts with the social theory. You know, if we agree on the social theory, you know, the operating procedure, you know, the lens through which we interpret social phenomena, right? If we agree on that, you know, we're in alignment. You know, and I got, like I say all the time, I don't think that it requires all of us to wake up. It don't require all of us to be on the same page. It just require a few of us. You know, it could be two, three, four people to create a life-sustaining institution that the rest of us can benefit from, right? You know, when you think about it, that's how every other group came to power or some form of prominence in any society. You know, it was a few good men, a few good women. It was a few good men, a few good women. It always is. You know, it's like you think about the United States. You know, we're here in the United States, and everyone is fighting for their constitutional rights, no matter how, whatever our views are about the government. You know, whether we don't agree with the government or we feel like the government is corrupt, we feel like the two-party system is corrupt and anti-people or whatever we believe about it. We're all asking for certain constitutional rights to stay in, you know, to benefit from. We want to benefit from these constitutional rights, right? But this constitution was created by enough men that can fit in a Starbucks for coffee. They could have coffee at Starbucks. Same amount of men crafted the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. It was created by a handful of men. A handful of men got together and said, "This is what we're going to do because we want to shift the balance of power from Great Britain to the colonies." And it was rich men, like it was guys like Samuel Adams, Benjamin Franklin, you know, a handful of guys. And they said, "Hey, we want to shift the balance of power. We're going to create a society that benefits us, and by default, it's going to benefit those who are like us." Right? And that's what they did. They established it, and now it's dictating the lives of 300 million people. Right? You have similar with every industry here. Like, for example, you look at the banking institutions. You know, the current banking model is the result of a single individual and his sons. He created the centralized banking system, and now that's the banking system of the globe. The IMF, the World Bank, the Federal Reserve, and every centralized bank in every country is functioning on this same banking model that was created by a man and his four sons, right? So we see this over and over again in history where these life-sustaining institutions were created by a small group of people who had a collective social theory. They shared the same social theory and they were able to implement something that benefited others. You know, like, for example, the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party's social theory was to develop institutions in the community that would benefit the people. So they had health clinics, they had lunch and breakfast programs in the community. And because the community was benefiting from it, they didn't have to become Black Panthers. They didn't have to be card carrying members of the Black Panthers. But because of this institution that the people was benefited from, the people benefiting from it made them support it. They made them support it. So the Black Panther Party gained favor from the community because of the life-sustaining institutions that they set up for the community. Right? It just needs to be replicated. It needs to be replicated, and I think it can be done by a few people. It doesn't have to be a lot of us.
Can you break down that quote you made in regards to how the gap doesn't, these statistics don't accurately demonstrate the gaps between blacks and whites?
Right. The wealth gaps, the health gaps, the education gaps. You know, taking them out of the historical context is intentional, and the aim, the intent, is to pathologize the Black community. You know, to say that we're financially illiterate. We're not smart enough financially to achieve. That we're not smart enough to learn. You know, and that we have no concern about our physical health and things of that nature. So, understanding the history, the context in which these things were created is very important. We can't eliminate 100 years of non-compete laws, right? We have 100 years of literally 100 years of non-compete laws where we were legally impeded from competing commercially with white America. You know, so that alone, and then we have housing discrimination, where the housing loans were white only. The farming loans were white only. For decades. We were dealing with this.
And before you continue, you know what's wild, man? It's like how welfare is presented like it's a black thing, but the origins of white wealth comes from welfare, right? Isn't the
Yes, that's
FHA loan
exactly
a
what we're talking
welfare?
about.
You know
That's
what I'm
exactly
saying?
what we're talking. Every
That's a
every
form of welfare,
policy,
right?
every white only policy that ever existed in this country was welfare. Whether it was the FHA, whether it was the Farmers Act, whether it was the Dawes Act, with the land grab, where they confiscated Native American land and redistributed it to white people who gave themselves Indian last names, gave themselves Native American last names. It's wild. You know, they would even classify Native Americans, a lot of them, as Negro, so that they would no longer qualify to gain inheritance from their own land. So it's it's a it's an injustice, to say the least, to not include this history in the context of wealth gaps. It just doesn't make any sense. But it's not supposed to, because it's designed to pathologize us. And I think that we tend to feed into the pathologizing, because we've been scripted by this marketing campaign as well. This marketing campaign that's designed to create the assumption of Black inferiority, right? We've bought into it. So now it's on autopilot, because media scripts human beings like code scripts computers. So we've been scripted. We're running a program that's been running for 400 years, the greatest marketing campaign in the history of the world. If you want to study marketing and psychology, study what happened to us in terms of the perception, and how they created this perception around us of inferiority, because now it's on autopilot. Because when we're talking about it, we like to ignore the context. People like to say, "Oh, that's the past." It's like, no, it's not. It's the present. It's right now. Everything that we're dealing with right now is the result of that thing. You know, and we don't we don't have to talk about what happened 250 years ago. We can talk about what happened 250 seconds ago. You know,
Do you think this generation or aspects or a percentage of this generation is getting a deeper understanding of how the system works and are doing better at navigating it.
Yeah, I think information in general is more available and readily accessible than ever before. You know, this is definitely the information age. You know, knowledge is increasing. You know, and we are aware of a lot of things. But like I say all the time, you know, knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Applied knowledge is power. And until we learn how to organize this knowledge and apply it, it's just information. You know,
Where would you recommend people get actual information?
read. I mean, you know, you have to read. You know, I actually was at a Nana Plata's place. You know, where him and Dr. Amos Wilson did all those amazing works and all of their contributions to this people. And I'm in there, and it's like all of the work. I have Dr. Amos Wilson's notes, all of his notes
That's crazy,
from all
bro.
of the books that he wrote, and I'm just turning through the pages like I'm unworthy to even be touching these documents. Right? It's actually his actual notebooks in his handwriting. You know, the typewriter he used, everything is there.
Hold on.
You
Didn't
know,
the brethren Renner basically let him use the office? Who's the guy that let him use the office he was using there in New York?
Plata
All right,
in
that's the guy.
Brooklyn.
All right, cool, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was at his house. You know, this was this year. This was earlier this year. You know, and he said, I asked him, I said, so do you think that we can find a way to incorporate the message, the proper messaging into other mediums like music or what have you to shift to move the needle on consciousness in terms of the group? And he said, he don't think that's how it's gonna happen. He said no. He said we have to read. He said we have to get back to reading.
That relationship
We
with
have
text.
gotta have the relationship with text. You have to have the text. You have to have the citations. You have to have the cross reference. You have to be able to go back and follow these things. And that's you know, and that's what I believe as well. I left there with an understanding of the question I asked, with a better, greater understanding of the question I asked, and the answer. The answer. Yes. So yeah, I think that we have to read more. We have to read more. That's the source. We have to go back. We have to study the documents. We don't have to write anything else.
Facts.
We really don't have to write anything else. I mean, it's already been written. Our ancestors, our elders, they've laid the groundwork. The work is there.
Because if you really check what's being written now, they're all just regurgitations or analysis of what's already been written for you.
Yes.
It's not really, there's no new concepts circulating
Yeah.
at this point,
Yeah, absolutely.
Man.
Absolutely. So that's where I would say we could get the information. We have to read. We have to promote reading. We have to promote studying again. We have to get young people to read. I mean, their attention span is like, a meme. That it's a meme. And a meme, if you really do the research on a meme is a mind virus. It's a mind virus. It's something that becomes contagious. When it moves from one person to the next and it catches on, it becomes viral. That's why it's viral. Right? Diseases and viruses are viral, right? So memes are the same thing, but it's just for your mind. It's a mind virus, So now when you're in conversations and dialogue with people, you express memes. You find yourself expressing a meme, and that's dangerous. Media scripts human beings like code scripts computers. And for some reason we haven't wrapped our mind around that concept thoroughly enough to understand what's happening to us.
And you,
Yeah.
you spoke about memes, and I always study watch times and attention spans. And my biggest concern is obviously the decline of attention, but also the decline of the ability to process information and critical thinking and comprehension of
Exactly.
information. A lot of times, I taught in school for a while. There's a lot of criticism of reading comprehension, right? But regular comprehension, like processing information and listening, is a skill that has declined tremendously and has continued to decline. And my concern is for humanity on a whole, because how can you have a society where people can't process not only written material, but verbal material? That's the issue we're running into right now. People can't process what you're saying, and they don't have an attention span to listen if you're not saying it in some meme, as you would say, fire. So I don't know. That's what I think about too, man, in regards to like just like how do we increase the attention span of people to get to the point where they are reading?
I think it starts. I think it starts young. I think it starts at the institutional level. Again, that's what institutions are for. That's how you get. That's how you reach the masses. You reach masses of people and large numbers of people uh, almost immediately. You think about our school systems. You think about our school systems. We have kids coming there every day. Students are coming there every day. You know, how are they coming out on the other end? You know, uh, we can start there and change it. Not and for the most part, it's not even that we're not readers or not interested in reading. It's more so what we're being given to read at the early age. We're in schools and what they're telling us to read is not interesting. It's not interesting to us. Like research has shown that black youth who are taught from an African-centered perspective do better in school, perform better on tests, perform better uh, throughout that whole process, in terms of critical thinking, reading comprehension, all of those things are enhanced when they're learning from the vantage point of centeredness, where they're centered.
Relatability sparks interest.
Believability, sports interest, and there it is. However, that's not the case everywhere, and it's like, and when we think about it, so there are African-centered schools in the country. There's plethora of them. My sons went to African-centered schools in Trenton, New Jersey, the Garvey School and African People's Action School, right? And those schools turned out 99% graduation rates every single year, year after year. The youth from the schools were heavily recruited by college preparatory schools, exclusive institutions. Like in Jersey, you have the George, in Pennsylvania, you have the George School right over the bridge from Jersey. You have Lawrenceville, Lawrenceville Prep. You have Princeton Day School. You have
Those like top notch 40 grand a year
yes,
schools.
40
Yeah.
grand a year schools. Hun, you have all of these top notch schools, but they were recruiting kids from the African centered schools that, my sons went to. And those schools are centered. Yes. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Baba Infodishi. Baba Infodishi was a teacher at the school. Baba Infodishi is like all over tours in Africa, like bigging it up. Dr. Layla Africa come to the school and speak at the school.
That's wild, bro.
So the kids were centered. And after they went on, graduated,
They held that.
right, they held it and they're still connected. All those youth are still connected, their family. And that I see that's the case with every African center school that I run to, whether it's in Philadelphia, whether it's in New Jersey, whether it's in Atlanta, it's the same thing. They're getting the same and similar results across the board. So why are we not implementing that across the public schools in our community that are 96% black? 96% black youth in this school, and it's failing. You have a 45% graduation rate.
All right, what school district you looking at? 'Cause I'm looking at 7%.
You looking at
13.
what?
I said, what school district you think is 45%? I'm at 13%,
You
7%,
got 13, 7%.
depending on what city, man.
Yeah, I mean, my
If they don't
numbers.
pass them,
Look, my numbers are probably from 96, 97. You know, but yeah, it's bad. You know, but the solutions are there. Just apply what's happening here. But then you run across that that condition that we're American. You know, that we're American conditioning. And we believe that it's a one size fit all when it comes to education. You know, yeah. But Marcus Garvey, I believe it was Marcus Garvey that said, "To know one's enemy is part of the complete education of a man." So, what part of education do you expect your enemy to teach you about themselves? Or even make you aware that they're a threat. You know,
but even Amos Wilson spoke about, he has the famous quote, I'm paraphrasing, if the education is not solving your problem, it's not useful to you.
that's the point of education.
And I think that one, people aren't accurately identifying their problems, and they're not searching for actual applicable solutions for their problems.
Right. And that's again a part of the falsification of consciousness that you are American. So if I'm an American, then I don't need to, it's not about the group that I belong to. I belong to the American group. So any shortcomings that you're having is not because you're black, it's because you're not excelling as an individual, and that's what heads believe. They're applying individual experiences, personal experiences to the group, which is not even possible when you have the proper context and when you have your knowledge in place, when you have your knowledge, when your analysis, when your analysis is sound, you'll understand that that's not the case. You cannot apply your personal experiences to the group. It's not the same dynamic. It's like an individual yes, I could do whatever. I could become a millionaire in the United States. As an individual, many of us have. I can do, yes, I can become a millionaire, but how do I raise my entire group to another level? You know, that's where you're going to run into the institution. That's where you're going to run into the racism that you're dealing with. That's what we say. What do we say? We say racism is institution. It's institution. It's an institutional thing. It's a power construct, right? And power is exercised at the institutional level. If you don't control institutions, you have no power. So you think about racism, and when we're confronted with it, we're always confronted with racism at the institutional level, even as individuals. We're running into the law enforcement. It's an institution. The courts. It's an institution. Medical discrimination. It's an institution. It's always institutions. Education. It's an institution. It's always an institution where you're meeting racism, because racism is an institution. It's an institution. And until you control the institutions, you're going to be running into this. So the need for us to develop institutions of our own, life-sustaining institutions that center us, that have our well-being, our preservation, our sustenance, our continuity as its mission statement. We're going to be here. We're going to be here, you know.
When did going to jail become cool? Because from what and please correct me, because you would know more than me, right? But the songs I heard growing up, I never heard really anyone glorify going to jail. They may speak about the misery of it, they may speak about returning home, but I didn't really hear anyone glorifying that experience. When did that become a thing in the music where you praise going to jail? I think that's the little tricky thing with this generation, right? It's like a badge of honor going to jail.
Right. So here's the thing with that. I think I mentioned this in my book. Uh, Going to jail or being incarcerated, getting locked up, was associated with the struggle, right, of an occupied community. Our communities are occupied, by law enforcement. So if you haven't had a brush with the law, if you haven't been incarcerated, what kind of black man are you actually? if you haven't had any types of issues with the law that's occupying the community to give us problems. So if you haven't had any run-ins with the law, you know, you're not really real. Is how is where the perception comes from. Like for example, you take the Black Panther Party. Black Panther Party were persecuted day in day out. Law enforcement on them day in day out for being political, for being politically conscious, for uh, pursuing liberation. You know, and you had every movement that we had was encroached upon by law enforcement. You know, was repressed. You know, agents of repression. That's what they were. You know, so the idea came from if if the police not fucking with you, what are you doing? You know, you're not working in the service of the group of the people in some kind of way, or you're not a real black person. You know, you're not a real nigga, so to speak. You know, but what happened was a lot of those codes, concepts started to become associated with criminality. You know, like even with snitching, right? Snitching, like the whole no snitching thing. That was, you know, if we have this political movement, we have this movement where we're doing these things for the liberation of the people. So you can't snitch. You can't be a William O'Neill. You can't be an agent. You know, you can't be a Della Roque telling on Nat Turner, you know, telling the guys, telling on Mark Vesey, you know, you can't be those. That's snitching. And, you know, snitching came out of out of movements, no snitching came out of political movements, those terms, you know, and then they became applied to, you know, gangsterism as well. You know, they were using the terms and now the lines are blurred, you know, and now it no longer have anything to do with anything political. But the reason that it became a rites of passage is because of mainstream media, you know, because it was promoted and marketed, you know, that this lifestyle has value. It has value, you know.
A valueless lifestyle has
Yeah,
value.
yeah, it has value. You know, being a gangster has value. You can make money. You can be promoted and marketed in this space if you adopt that attitude and lifestyle. So, you know, while it might have been a few heads, you know, who were advancing the idea in the community itself, mainstream media rewarded it, incentivized it. Record companies, corporations, they incentivized the behavior. You know, so now you have kids who had never committed a crime, no intent of committing a crime, creating music and content as if they had, you know, and blowing up and getting money for it. You know, like for example, you think about Poor Righteous Teachers, and Brand Nubian and X Clan, and when we came up, I know for a fact when I was coming up as a young guy, and I'm listening to hip hop every day, it was Public Enemy that made me aware of Joanne Chesimard. It was Public Enemy that made me aware of Farrakhan. Farrakhan's a prophet that I think you ought to listen to. They can say it, you know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, you know, so we hearing this in mainstream media at the time.
In
So
'92 wasn't Public Enemy like #1 on the charts?
yeah,
Yeah, it's crazy,
yeah.
right?
So it's scripting me. It's scripting me and my peers, right? So much so that we were we were on the corner, you know, and we were 1 foot in and 1 foot out as 5%ers, you know. So we're on the corner, and one of my peers pull up. Yeah, same age as me, same age as me. He pulls up in a car. He's like 17. Pull up. Hey, Farrakhan's in Philly. Farrakhan's speaking in Philly at the convention center. Y'all wanna ride out? Like, we all jump in the car. We all jump in the car and went to see Farrakhan. It's my first time ever seeing Farrakhan speak. Ever.
How was that experience?
It was great. It was one of those pivotal moments.
That's when Farrakhan was hot too, fighting. Farrakhan was full of
Yes.
fire. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And they had that you could buy the cassette from that speech that they were recording them right there. So you could just get it right there. The VHS, the cassette. So we were coming home with all types of information. you know, and we were corner kids in the projects. You know, we were in the projects. We were project kids all the way 1,000% project kids. You know, and we were going to see Farrakhan because we were being scripted that way by the media that we were into, right? So the same machine that made poor righteous teachers relevant and recognized is the same machine that's making Sexy Red relevant and recognized. It's the same machine. Without the mainstream machine, nobody would know who poor rights teachers were. Nobody would know who Public Enemy was. You know, it's the same machine. It's just what they choose to magnify at any given time. You know, and that's what today they choose to magnify the kid that's going to prison and say, okay, this is a rites of passage for you. And again, when we do the research and put everything in its context, we'll see that it's beneficial to the corporation for these kids to go to jail because they're invested in prisons, right? So we have the same companies or the majority shareholders in all of these companies across the board. The majority shareholder is the same across all of the prison corporations, the record companies, the radio stations. The majority shareholder is the same company, you know. So it's agenda driven, you know. It's agenda driven, and that's where we are with it.
Do you think the corporations learned from that 90s to say that, man, like the music that we're, even though they were profiting from it, this music is kind of edifying this crew here and this can't work? Is that the reason for the shift? Because I don't think, from what I understand, what occurred during that time, I don't think they knew what they were doing when they were promoting that type of music. I know they were
No, they
thinking about the
didn't.
profits, but they weren't aware of how they were indoctrinating these children to look
Right.
into themselves and grow.
Yeah, that's why I call that era the so-called golden era. I call it the glitch in the matrix. It was a glitch in the matrix. That was the discovery era where the corporations were discovering the influence and impact that hip hop culture actually had. You know, that's when they came to the realization of what hip hop could actually do.
And said, this can't work. We got to switch this
No,
up.
it can't work. It can't work. And from that point on, it was hijacked. You know, it was hijacked, and they use it. You know, they use it to this day for not just to disseminate pathology, dysfunction, and the idea of black inferiority, but they also utilize the conscious messages as well. The conscious artists, they use them as well this day, this very day.
Please elaborate more on that. How are they using the conscious artist?
You know, one of the things that I talk about in the book is programs that they have. The government has music programs, like the Rhythm Roads program. At the time of when I was writing, that program was under Hillary Clinton. She was Secretary of State under Barack Obama, and she ran the Rhythm Roads program. This program has a few $1 million budget to send artists on diplomatic missions around the world.
With a specific message I take.
So they would send the artists with a liberation message, with a revolutionary message, with a anti-oppression, anti-injustice message to these political hotspots around the world that the United States had issues with, in hopes of causing uprisings, youthful uprisings against the governments. And it worked. They sent them to Libya, they sent them to Syria, they sent them to Egypt. And right after the tours, after the rappers leave, the youth are now mobilizing and having these movements on the ground that caused these Arab Springs and all these things that cropped up at that laid the groundwork for the removal of leadership, whether it was Gaddafi or whoever.
Can you say some of the artists or no? They were part of that program at the
Now
time?
you
Or
just Google it. Google the Rhythm
the
Rose
time?
program.
All right.
You know, and you'll see the artists, and then go listen to their music.
All right.
You know, listen to their music, and you'll see the messaging. And this is something that they've always done. It didn't just happen with our generation in hip hop. This goes way back. They were doing it way back. I mean, during World War II, the military, U.S. military, you know, set up V-Day Records. an entire record label,
V-Day Records. I gotta
V
look
Day
this up for
Records.
you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so they set up V Day Records, and they procured the services of established artists, Louis Armstrong, a bunch of guys, I believe Bob Dylan, and they paid them to make songs that would advance American propaganda against Germany, create propaganda to demoralize Germans, you know, and, they've been doing it. They've been doing it. I mean, they had a $millions budget, and they gave artists budgets at a time when artists in the United States were on strike. Artists in the United States, all those artists that they used for V-Day Records were on strike because the labels wasn't paying them. So the labels, they wanted more money from the labels, you know, more royalty, more rights. And so they were on strike. So the military was like, oh, perfect opportunity. Now we can give them, we can pay them, sustain their lives through this strike, and they'll create propaganda for us. So he was always doing that with music. Yeah, Merlin Dietrich, the famous singer, she was a spy. She was a spy. So they've always done this. And we see recently we had uh we had U.S. aid. I believe this was during the Obama administration too. You had U.S. aid get caught sending rappers into Cuba to incite riot.
I gotta go look this up, man.
Yeah, yeah, USA, man, just Google it. USA rap concerts in uh, Cuba, where the artists weren't even from Cuba. They trained these artists up. They were the same artists that helped replace the government in Serbia. I believe it was, yeah, sir. It was Czech Republic or Serbia. It was yeah, it was Serbia. I think it was called Uptour. Uptour was the name of the movement. It's called Uptour, OPTR. And they were promoters and rappers. So they created these rap concerts to mobilize the young people against their government. And it worked. Then they took those same guys and took them to get Cuban artists to do the same thing, USA. So USA, and they got caught. Cuban government caught them, and it's mainstream news. It's mainstream news. You had U.S. Congress trying to disassociate itself from U.S. aid because of it.
I check that out.
Yeah, so we've always used music this way, and this is what I mean about the messaging and what it's capable of. So while these messages that can create social change in the United States and upend the status quo are banned, relatively banned in the United States. You get no financing, you get no radio play. You gotta either be Sexy Red or Drake, right? To really get any traction. They're not trying to finance that message, but the government is financing that message to go to other countries. That same anti-government message.
How much did Farrakhan influence that generation?
How much did they influence what?
That generation, your generation of artists.
Well, quite a bit. Quite a bit, because Farrakhan represented the he represented a continuation of Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and the ideas that gave rise to Father Allah, Clarence 13X. So we got to see in Farrakhan, we were able to see someone who walked with them, right? So we can get an understanding of how that movement was actually moving in real time, because he was there, as Farrakhan was mentored basically by Malcolm X, uh, and the father was also at the school in Malcolm X, Harlem, so yeah, I mean, he was very impactful, especially as a continuation of what we were already delving into. We were going down the rabbit hole. He was from the rabbit hole. He was from the rabbit hole. We were going down. So it was definitely going to be some impact and influence there. You know, but yeah, so Farrakhan influenced us, and his influence on us, on me personally, and possibly I probably can speak for poor righteous teachers too, is is relative to the relationship with Father Allah and the Nation of God's Earth. That the 5%. That's where any influence will come from. How we perceived him in that context.
How was the process for you writing your book?
Yeah, I agree with Styles P.
Yeah.
I agree. It's a totally different reality. I have a newfound respect for literaries. You know, I'm a reader. I'm a reader, so I read a lot of books, and but writing a book, it's it's a totally different experience, man. It's a totally different experience. It's because okay, a part of a large part of art is philosophical. You know, so it's your imagination, it's philosophy, it's it's we call it freestyle. That's how you can have a freestyle. You can't have a freestyle if it wasn't imagination or creative imagination, right? Whereas with writing a book, a literary work, if it's not fiction, you have to have all of the research. It requires a lot of research, a lot of understanding of English language. You start to learn things about the English language. I learned that I don't know anything about English. That's what I learned. I learned that I fuck up the Queen's English, quite literally. Yeah, but yeah, it's tough. It's a different experience. I enjoyed the process. I had like editors sending your work back to you. After the editors go through, they send it back to you. You like feel like you're writing all over again. Feel like you have to rewrite all over again. So it's like going over it just for grammar. Just for grammar a lot of times. And I get why a lot of authors, sometimes just forego grammar and say, I'm going to write it exactly how we speak where I'm from, and I get why people do that. And those make some of the best books, the most communicative books, you know, and, and a lot of them resonate. They resonate with people more immediately, but yeah, there's a process with the editing. People,
I know you spoke about the English part, but what else did you learn about yourself during that process? And your not only yourself, but
yeah,
your perception of the world and the ideas during that repetition and really delving deep to clearly articulate your ideas.
I realized that I'm I've never been satisfied with anything I've ever written, whether it was lyrics or the book. I always thought that it could be improved. I always thought that I could do more. I always thought more could be added. I always thought I could have said something differently. I think so what I learned was that I'm constantly critiquing myself. I'm probably my worst critic, my best and worst critic, and I'll hold a project. It that that conception of the work will make me hold a project and not release it. I mean, like the book. The book came out 2020, but I wrote the book in 2009.
You wrote the book in 2009.
Yeah,
So why did you let it sit so long?
because it kept ballooning. It kept ballooning. It's so much information that's relative to it. So it kept. So how do I condense all of this information? So then I'll just sit and dive. So a year I would just not even touch it. I was like, it's just processing. And then in that time of processing, things would happen in the real world, like the Cuba thing, like the key thing with USAID in Cuba. I'm like, this is what I'm saying. This is my point. So I'm going to add this. I'm going to talk about this a little bit in the book. The Rhythm Rose program. I was writing before I found out about the Rhythm Rose program before it even went into effect. I had already started writing the book, So I was like, yo, these things are what I was saying about V-Day Records and all those things that I had that information already because it had already happened, you know, but so then the book would just start to swell, you know, and then I realized that this is why people do volumes. This is why they have sequels. This is why they have updated editions and things of that nature. But yeah, I think what I learned about myself was that I am my own worst critic and I will hold a project, you know, even music, even music. If I feel like, I could record albums. I have albums just sitting and I'll never release it because my views on the delivery systems, you know, and I'll just, you know, certain things will just knock the energy out of it for me, but I love making music. I love writing rhymes. I love recording. I love hip hop culture. I love sharing the music with people. Um, but when I think about the delivery systems, the business of it, I have like three
Material.
full-length studio albums that I just didn't release at all. I just finished one too. I just finished another one. It's like bad projects, man. I just haven't released.
As you've gotten older, right, and have a uh, broader, or one could argue, deeper understanding of life, your lyrics are already fight. I don't want to say they're complicated, but they're challenging. All right. How do you prevent it from being even more challenging to the average consumer?
And that's the thing. I don't know how. I don't know how. And people say that. People say that a lot. You're like, yo, I gotta have a thesaurus. I gotta get a dictionary. I gotta Google. I gotta, research what you're saying, and that's just to get the surface thing. That's just to get the surface thing. The entendre, the metaphors, the simile, the schemes. People don't readily grab that. So I'll say some things, and you think I'm saying one thing, and I am, but like most artists, I'm saying a lot of other things as well. You know, like I'll say, anti-semiconductor, running your jewels. That's one hell of a run. Some folk doing the mostest, no fair rules. Some play games, some marry 'em, right? In that line, it's like anti-semiconductor, running your jewels. That's one hell of a run. Some folks doing the mostest, no fair rules. I don't play games, some marry 'em. Anti-Semite, the conduction. That's one hell of a running your jewels. That's one hell of a run. A run. Some folks doing the mostest, Moses. No fair rules, pharaohs. Some play games, some Miriam, Aaron, Moses, Miriam, the Jews, anti-Semitism, all of that in that one line. But people wouldn't even think it.
I didn't want to cut you off earlier, right? But like I was laughing internally when you said you didn't know the Queen's English, and I just want to know, like, what are you quantifying to say you mastered? Because obviously you mastered language to make those rhymes. That's why I was laughing at myself. I didn't want to cut you off, but you said like the man said he don't. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, bro, you mastered the English language. I see what you were saying in regards to proper English, but like I don't know what you were using to quantify mastery of English. Because for you to make rhymes that you have mastered language. You have mastered the English language. So I didn't know what you were
You
referring to
know,
when you said you were struggling with the writing part.
yeah, it's interesting, man. I always say that, I'll take some of the rappers that I respect. I would take them over Shakespeare, you know.
Real quick, what
I,
rappers do you respect? I would like to hear what rappers you do respect.
oh man, I mean, it's so many,
Not
but
respect,
but
but
I
really
will
hold
say
on a level.
I would say, of course, Chuck D, you know, KRS One, of course, Rakim, Brother J, X Clan, of course, you
Coogee
know,
Rap?
Of course. I mean,
Yeah.
Coogee Rap, of course, Coogee Rap, Big Daddy
People
Kane,
don't mention
all
him
this stuff.
a lot when I hear them talk about great rappers for whatever reason, but I know he's kind of. Well, don't worry about it. Continue. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
want to
yeah,
see.
yeah. So and it's quite a few. Even rappers that people don't even mention. Like even Pos and True Blood.
Yeah.
You know, the way they put words together. The way they would say things. You know, it was it's just amazing to me, you know. It's it's amazing, you know. But yeah, you know, it's like I'm complicating it, uncomplicating it. You know, it's tough. You know, it's tough, man. You know, it's just the way I'll be processing things. You know, so lyrically, you know, I hope people get it one day. You know, you know, and that's the way I think about it. It's time capsule. You know, it's like you might catch up at some point. You know, you know, and I incorporate a lot of pop things, a lot of pop ideas and pop culture that that people might know into it. You know,
But you still need a certain level of intellect to process it. And
yeah,
I think that do you find that like you have like a cult following with the younger generation?
I'm not sure.
Not sure.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Because I noticed with this generation, there's a large portion that's really delving deep into lyricist fire. Like they're really on that lyrical vibe, and they really search. I'm pretty sure they ran into you. You know, I'm not sure if they reached out, or they coming to the shows, but I'm pretty sure they had to run into you at some point
mm,
because they're looking for a they're looking for a deeper level of context in music, right? No disrespect to the artists, but usually when they say hip hop in this generation, they'll say Nas, that Biggie, Tupac range. But you have a crew that's not even acknowledging that. You know, they're looking for more lyricists.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely the case. You know, you have kids that are really heavy on lyrics. You know, I've had kids come to me and say, "Yo, this line
Yeah.
right here, this did it for me." You know, I'm like, "Oh, you caught that, ah?" You know, because sometimes it'd be so layered and stacked. You know, you're not sure if anybody getting it, and I think that's what art is. You know, for me, that's what art is. You know, I don't care if you don't understand it. Really, I don't care if you don't understand. If you don't get it right now, I don't care. It's like that. It's like that wild style tag. You know, can you figure out the letters? What does it say? You don't even know what it say. You know, and I'm a writer that use all the fonts. You know, I'm using all the fonts. You know, I'm not just tagging with bubble letters. You know, I'm using every font available. You know, so sometimes it get a little tricky. Sometimes it get a little heavy.
When you I recently interviewed this guy Tippy I agree from St. Croix. Are you familiar with a guy Vaughn Benjamin from Midnight?
Benjamin,
Yeah, from Midnight from St. Croix.
nah,
Crazy lyricist. You would enjoy him,
I
bro.
need to
Check
check
him
him
out.
out.
Very seriously, like up there.
Check it out.
But he was mentioning that he worked with him. I was trying to get into his writing process, right? And he was saying that he never wanted to hear a rhythm prior to going to the studio. He wanted to be an empty vessel, right? Um, when you're making rhymes, like because you read or read so much prior, did you notice that those seeped into the rhymes at that time, or you were more still open to what was downloaded in you at the time? I'm not sure if I'm saying this properly. All right. Whatever you were reading at the time, did that influence whatever you were writing at that specific time, or were you still kind of open to whatever the universe was giving you at the time?
I was always open.
All right.
Was always open. You know, I read so much. I read so much. I don't always write about what I'm reading.
All right. That's what I want to know.
I
Like, if
don't.
that really influences what you're writing at the time, you
Now,
know?
however, I would reference something. I would reference something that I read. You know, yeah. Like I said, even things that I might watch. You know, or things that I might see in pop culture. You
You
know.
just change it all around for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll mess it up a little bit. I'll mess it up. You know. For another example, I said, all hell the queen, Charlotte's web address to issue. Gains in these domains come with anti-black official, unofficial rules. Rulers regulate regular in private practice how to get away with murder, right? Watch what you say. Keep rap's anatomy gray. Right? Watch what you say. Keep rap's anatomy gray. Give white folk the glory just to tell a black story. You can cross that bridge 10 times out of 9, get your black card denied trying to outshine the rhymes. Shonda Rhimes wrote Bridgerton. She wrote Grey's Anatomy. She wrote How to Get Away with Murder. She wrote Private Practice. So I just incorporated all that. And she wrote Queen Charlotte. So all hell the queen, Charlotte's Web addressed the issue. Gays in this domain come with anti-black official, unofficial rules. Rulers regulate regular. In private practice, how to get away with murder. Watch what you say. Keep rap's anatomy great. Give white folk the glory just to tell a black story. You can cross that bridge 10 times out of 9. Get your black card denied trying to outshine the rhymes. Outshine the rhymes. So shine the rhymes, cross that Bridgerton, the show, the series that's on Netflix, So that's just a scheme with that pays homage to Shonda Rhimes and her writing, you know, and how she creates stories with that center white people, but have black people in the periphery a lot of times telling a story about, like she wrote Bridgerton. Bridgerton is a straight up European, about European royalty and things of that nature. But Queen Charlotte is in the periphery. She's presiding over everything that's happening in Bridgerton, and she's a black queen, right? She's the black queen of England. And but to tell that story, she had to send white people.
I gotta
So
ask you this question, Fire. Be truthful, right? Because you're a man that really sacrificed for this thing. You just stayed in your lane and stayed true to yourself, which is rare, right? And I know you had struggles because you probably figure, I'm not sure internally if you figure you had more commercial success or other things. Why didn't you just go commercial, Fire, and use your talent for other things? Why did you stay? Because it's a rare thing for a person to stay true to what they believe in and miss out on the financial profits. Why did you choose to do that?
because I mean, I wouldn't even consider it being staying true to what I believe in. Um, it was more so just being true to me. You know, that's who I am. That's who I am, and I feel like art is about who I am. Whenever you start thinking about fans and sales and spins and streams and dollars, you're not making art anymore. That's commercial. That's industry. It's not art. It's commercialization. It's a commercial product. It's not art anymore. So I'm an artist, and
A
art for
true
me is about
artist.
expressing myself.
Yeah.
It's about self-expression. It's about making people think, provoking thought. And when you're doing that, when you're looking at sales and monetization, first and foremost, what you're doing is you're actually starting to, as a hip hop artist, you're starting to go down that road of seeking acceptance from a system that hip hop was created to challenge. You know what I mean? It's like, not looking for acceptance from that. I'm not looking for awards. I'm not looking to be on the award shows. I'm not looking to be mentioned at all. You know, uh, I'd rather be respected by my peers than than that system, that apparatus, that thing.
You say respected by your peers or the system. I think it really comes down to people who want to be validated by white people. You know,
It's,
I said no. I said you said like you don't want to be accepted by the system, but I think it really comes. The wording is I shouldn't be telling this man about words, but
I told you I don't know. I'm not good at English,
the
so
wording is, um, man, we want to be accepted. We want that white validation, bro. We want that stamp from white people to validate ourselves in regards to we're at a level in our craft, and I think that's what a lot of people suffer from.
yeah,
You know,
exactly. It's like when we seek that kind of acceptance, we're going against everything the culture was created for. It was created to challenge that. Hip hop was disruptive. It was anti-status quo. It was, okay, you're telling us that this is not art. You're telling us it's vandalism. For us, we're beautifying this train. This art is beautiful. You know what I mean? We're beautifying these walls, but you're telling us it's not art, it's not worthy of museum status. So F your museum. You don't want our art in your museum. We're gonna put it on the wall right here. This community is our museum, right? That's not dancing. That's not dancing. They will come and try to arrest us for congregating on a cardboard box
serious?
on the corners.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dispersed crowd, you loitering, but we got the boom box, we break, That's not dancing. We can't do it in your dance companies. We can't get your venues. We can't host things in your venues for the dance that we do for break dancing and things of that nature. So, okay, we're going to do it in the streets. We're going to get our cardboard. We're going to have a vinyl. We're going to do it here. So we were always disruptive in that way and going against the status quo and challenging the status quo. Rap music challenge. He said it wasn't music. He said that's not music. Challenge the status quo. We say, okay, whatever. We don't need to use your venue to do concerts. We're gonna do it in the park. We're gonna do it plug in the street lights. We're gonna do it in this abandoned building. We're gonna do it wherever we can do it at because we know this is the community that is doing it. We don't care about none of that. This is what we do, and that for me is what hip hop is. That's what rap is. It's always been disruptive. It's always been innovative. You know, and going against and challenging the status quo. So when we're seeking validation from a system that the art was created to challenge, we fell off.
What is your thoughts about the origins of hip hop coming out of Jamaica, sound system culture?
Well, I'm gonna have to take Kool Herc's word for it. You know, Kool Herc said that that's not what happened. He said his sound system came from American youth. He said his sound system was more similar to what American youth was already doing. He listed a plethora of DJs that helped him get to where he got in terms of his craft. And he said that the thing that separated him from them is he was just going for more clarity in his system. He wanted his system to be very clear, you know, and that was that. That's Kool Herc, so I'm not, I wasn't there, so I gotta go with the documentation that we have. So I turn to the pioneers. I turn to the guys that were there before me. They're the teachers, of that history. So I have to take it from them. I have to take their word for it. And then and for me, when we look at hip hop in general, my question is always how many of the elements existed before 1970. you know, and basically all of them existed before 1970. So there was breakdancing. We actually have clips of breakdancing from 1950. We have MCs and rapping on what is now considered a boom bap beat, but it was a band playing that same cadence to like for example, Pig Meat Markham. You had Pig Meat Markham, 1968. Here Come the Judge.
Yeah.
It's a straight up hip hop record that can be reproduced today the same way, use the same beat, same rhyme flow. You know, and this was before the kids in the Bronx even started to coalesce these elements together to create this thing that was called hip hop. Graffiti artists. Early like 1971, 1969 and 71, black graffiti artists in Philadelphia was one of the first guys to start pinning on wall and sending his name around the neighborhoods and on the trains. And then from there, I think Taki came after that. Taki and them came after that in New York. But I could be wrong, but this is what the pioneers and legends that I congregate with, that I've spoken to about it. And like I said, I respect everybody that was there. I love this culture. Jamaican artists and music and culture had a heavy influence on what I do. You know what I mean?
Any particular artist you like to mention?
What's that?
Any particular artist you like to
Oh, hell
mention?
yeah. Hell yeah. Ika Mouse. Man,
Yeah, come on.
come on, man. Ika Mouse, Michigan and Smiley.
Right.
You know,
You dealing with straight DJs.
yeah, 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 for sure. That's all we used to listen to a lot of reggae artists right alongside the rap. It was reggae artists. You know, and we used to be in a lot of dub sessions. One of our best friends and homies, Face and them, they were on the Easy Star record that we did in '92. But their father, Ja Pops, Junior Pops, Ja Pops, Junior Pops, Lego Man, Long Man, Ferocious, all of those guys. They used to have the dub sessions. Heineken, weed, and rubbing up against girls. But enough respect to the culture, man. It's a culture, and hip hop has always sampled everything. Hip hop has sampled everything. Hip hop has never been, you know, one sound or one thing. It's always been a sampling of everything. because it's very improvisational. It's improv, so we're building off of pieces of things, and creating something new. That's always been the case. But yeah, man, Eka Mouse for sure, Yellow Man, Fathead, you know, uh, you know, just man, we pinches, you know,
And the people you mentioned, man, especially Yellow Man, Fire, like I had the fortunate experience of interviewing Yellow Man, and I was asking about his timing. You get what I'm saying? Like that time Fire is like a perfection. And he just said, yo, you don't even know. He just said it's just something that he did. You know, he never thought about it. It's
yeah,
just like this man has the perfect voice and the perfect timing for rhyming.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy, man. It's like that's a creative intelligence, man. Creative intelligence. It doesn't fit within the realm of perfection. It's feeling. You're doing it to feeling, and feeling is the most perfect thing in terms of rhythm for me. And that's what I like, man. I love it when we're just creating, just create from your imagination, your intelligence. Creative imagination.
And I think that's one
Love
of
it.
the things with art, man. It's just people don't understand it. They can't accept you can't explain it.
Yeah, exactly,
You know, it's a brilliance you can't
exactly.
quantify or
You can't.
explain.
That's art.
Yeah.
That's art. And that's why the commercialization of it complicates it in a lot of ways. It demeans it to a degree. It demeans it to a degree because, for example, you could release a single. You could release a song, and the commercialization of that song, the economy of the time, okay, that's worth 99 cents is the single. But that song might resonate with someone so much that they might be willing to pay you $1,000 for that song, right? Just like art on a wall, just like art on a wall. But commercialization, it creates this process that demeans the music, devalues the music in a lot of ways. So where they replicate it so much, it's so many copies of something
So diluted,
that
yeah.
it, yeah, it just diminishes the value of it. But yeah, that's why I like vinyl. I like CDs, to a degree. I was a little mad at CDs when they came out, but vinyl for sure, you know, tangible, and it holds value. It can hold value, you know. Whereas with the MP3s and the streaming and all of that, it's like it just devalues the music. So much of it is so replicable. It's like so many copies of the same thing going on everything. Everybody's like, okay, this is streaming heavy. I'm going to replicate that. I'm going to do that. And the same thing was happening with radio. You know, oh, that's what's getting played on radio. I'm going to make that type of music. And that's what happened. That's how we saw this little shift in the mainstream. Because when Public Enemy was on the radio, kids aspired to be like Public Enemy. So artists would write in that vein. They wanted to say something conscious. They wanted to say something relative to the struggle of the people. But when they shifted that and they started bringing in the gangsterism, the drug dealing music, you know, when the drug dealers started rapping, you know, uh, then that started getting promoted and kids started delivering that brand of content. And then the drug dealers were replaced by the gangbangers, and then the gangbangers, the shooters in the gang started rapping. So the shooters in the gang started rapping, then now the kids started delivering that type of content. Now the kids on drill time, and it's is what media do, man. It's what commercialization and media do. Whoever controls the media controls the masses. We like to say, if
Edward Bernays.
yeah, man, if it ain't in the mainstream, it ain't in the bloodstream with the majority of the people. So it's problematic.
Well, Fire, we give thanks for this reason and tell you the truth, man. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it speaking to a master of his craft, you know? And we
Appreciate you.
appreciate sharing all your information, you know?
Thanks for having me, man.
No, serious thing.
It's what we do, man. It's what we do. And this whole thing is a continuation of culture. When you think in terms of rap snacks and what we do with the Rap Snacks Foundation, the whole point of Rap Snacks is it's resource capture 101, right? So, like I said, you go in the corner store, no products produced by us. So let's produce a product. You know, James created a product that we all consumed heavily, right? But had no representation in the overall industry, in the overall space. It's a $500 billion industry globally. You know, we had no representation. So developing a brand like Rap Snacks and then using Rap Snacks, leveraging the success of Rap Snacks to build community organizations through a foundation, you know, Boss Up Foundation. You know, we're in the community teaching youth how to replace some of the products in those corner stores with our own products. You know, we live in these communities. We could put products in these stores. You know, a lot of other things. Just making sure that we, engage the youth, give them opportunity, and let them understand, social theory. Give them a way, give them a lens, another lens by which to interpret social phenomena. You know, so that when they, so then their education, their finances, and their politics can be filtered through this theory that by default allows it to benefit the group. Because that's the problem now. We have rich individuals in the culture. We have people making millions and billions of dollars. You know, we have people with education. Who are brilliant. And we have athletic resources and all types of resources, but they don't benefit us because we're not processing them through a social theory that's designed for our sustenance and preservation. So that's how you apply. How do I apply my politics? I apply my politics through this lens, through this social theory that has us centered. So whenever I spend my money, whenever I utilize my education, whenever I cast a vote, I'm doing it through that filter that's going to make me ask the question, how does this affect the group? Right? How does this benefit the group? How does my decision impact the group? And that's what's lacking in general. So trying to reestablish those type of things, taking the principles of the African Center schools and applying them to the overall community, like Dr. Hannibal F. Freak started CB, Council of Independent Black Institutions. And that's where all the African Center schools in the country fall under CB, basically, you know, um, and just expanding on that idea. You know, uh, we need more. We need a Council of Independent Black Institutions, not just for the educational side, but for the financial side and the political side as well. You know, and so the Reps Foundation or Boss Up Foundation, we work with youth all the time, day in and day out. You know, developing platforms for them to prosper. You know, for them to prosper from the vantage point of the culture. And we do,